Well, the Prime Minister looked like a happy little Vegemite himself there. Joining me live from the Gold Coast is Employment and Workplace Relations Minister Murray Watt. Murray Watt, thanks for your time.
G'day, Andrew. Good to be with you and happy Easter.
Oh, happy Easter to you too. I appreciate you spending Easter Sunday with us. Let's ask about this plan that you announced yesterday to legislate to enshrine penalties in awards. Aren't there times when workers are happy to trade off penalties to get a decent pay rise?
There are, Andrew, but our view is that should happen through enterprise bargaining negotiations, which are supervised by the Fair Work Commission and have a range of safeguards in place, such as the need for the agreement to pass the Better Off Overall test. What we're saying here is that penalty rates matter. Penalty rates are paid on weekends and public holidays, and they are special times. That's when we all get together for birthday parties, family gatherings, grand finals, and they deserve to be recognised as special. And for the workers, for instance, who are working over this Easter, they deserve to be paid their penalty rates for giving up some of that special time to serve the rest of us, whether it be in the shops or cafes. So what we're saying is that awards are a safety net. They set the base minimum pay and conditions for workers, and we shouldn't have a situation like we do at the moment where the big supermarkets and other big employers and big business groups are trying to strip penalty rates out of awards without properly compensating people for that.
Well, is the government looking to take this even further? Would you look at taking the setting of awards away from the Fair Work Commission and make them a decision at the Cabinet table?
No, we wouldn't do that, Andrew. I mean, there's been a long-standing practice in Australian workplace relations where we do have an independent umpire, being the Fair Work Commission, whose job it is to set those minimum rates of pay. They do a range of other things as well, such as setting the minimum wage every year. And having that independent body is important. But what's also important is that the government of the day take a position on these matters. And what we've said is that we think
so why take power off the Commission here other than to try and get re-elected?
It's not so much a matter of taking power off the Commission, Andrew, as giving them guidance about what the parameters should be. I mean, the Fair Work Act is full of guidance and parameters that's provided by the government of the day and the Parliament towards the Fair Work Commission about minimum standards, about things that need to be retained in awards and agreements. And what we're saying is that penalty rates fall into that category. It's really disappointing that we saw Peter Dutton yesterday say that he won't support this and he's prepared to stand by.
Are you giving them guidance, or are you legislating so that they can't take them out of awards in exchange for a pay rise? Is that guidance, or is that taking away their power?
Well, what we're doing is setting the parameters of what must be included in awards and what cannot be removed from awards. And we think that penalty rates are an important part of people's pay packet. I was yesterday in Brisbane with a range of retail assistants, hospitality workers, banking and clerical workers who rely on those penalty rates to be able to pay their bills. And we shouldn't have a situation in Australia where big business groups can roll into the Fair Work Commission and demand that those penalty rates be removed. But again, this is what Peter Dutton is prepared to let happen. He has said that he won't support our legislation, just like he has said about a week or two ago that he won't support a real wage increase to the minimum wage. And all that shows is that Peter Dutton will allow pay rates to be cut if he wins the next election, just like he'll cut Medicare and a range of other things.
All right, we'll get to the Medicare or Mediscare campaign later. I understand you're called the Labor Party, but you've gone so far on industrial relations in this term of government, one could almost call it reverse work choices, Murray Watt. Hasn't this made life just a lot harder for employers? What you've done on casuals, on the right to disconnect, now on penalty rates, on not allowing employers to get the Fair Work Commission to trade in them for pay rises. Isn't the problem that you put so many things in the way of the private sector hiring people, so many extra costs, that the growth in employment has been in the public sector, and that's a big concern for the economy going forward? For example, since 2022, 70% of jobs created, or roughly 70%, were in non-market services. Only 99,000 of the 484,000 new jobs created in 2024 were in the private market sector. Do you acknowledge you're putting barriers in the way of small business and business employing people?
No, I don't, Andrew. I mean, we obviously support small businesses growing, and that's why we've seen a record number of companies created over this term of office. We're seeing 25,000 new companies created every month, which is a record in Australia, far more than we saw under coalition governments of any variety before. We're also seeing historically low unemployment rates at the same time as we're lifting wages and bringing inflation down. So I would argue that that's very strong economic policy that's having that outcome. I mean, we need to remember, Andrew, that when we came to office, we were coming in after 10 years of a coalition government that had deliberately kept wages low. And that's why, heading into the last election, real wages were falling. They weren't keeping pace with inflation. We go into this election with 5 quarters in a row or 15 months of seeing wages rise above inflation, a complete mirror image of the situation that we inherited from the coalition.
Yes, but
at the same time, seeing record numbers of companies being created, historically low unemployment.
What sort of economy are we going to have if all the new jobs are in the NDIS, in health and in government services, including a whole bunch of more public servants? Is that what you want to see?
Well, for starters, 4 out of 5 of the jobs that have been created in this term of office have been in the private sector. Some of them have been in government-funded services, admittedly, but many of them have been in what you might call the market sector, in the cafes, in the shops, right around Australia. So we have seen strong growth of jobs in the private sector, and that's the way we want to see it. The most recent GDP figures showed that we are seeing economic growth rebound, particularly in the private sector, and that's terrific to see as well. But also, we make no apologies for properly funding our government services, and that's something that Australians wanted to see. To give you one example, aged care. You'll remember the Royal Commission that operated under the former government. Titled Neglect was the name of the report, which showed gross underfunding of our aged care services under the former government. So we make no apologies for funding more aged care workers, funding a pay rise for those workers so they stay in the sector. Do you make any apologies for running up $40 billion deficits a year? Well, no. I mean, obviously the economic conditions have changed somewhat over the last 12 months, Andrew. But again, we've delivered 2 consecutive budget surpluses. No government has done that for 20 years, coalition or Labor. And that's been the result of some hard work by Jim Chalmers, the Prime Minister, Katie Gallagher and the ERC to find nearly $100 billion worth of savings over the course of this government. So, we do think that we can look back at our economic record, demonstrate that it's been responsible, delivering those surpluses, paying down enormous quantities of Liberal debt. We've paid down, the national debt is $177 billion less than it was under the coalition when we came to office. And as I say, at the same time, keeping unemployment low, more than halving inflation from what it was, and finally seeing wages grow above inflation again, which is the way we want to see things continue.
There is an argument some dishonesty has been applied by your side of politics in this campaign. You're saying continually, for example, the nuclear reactors will cost $600 billion and this will be recouped by cuts. The opposition's modelling puts the cost at $120 billion, and won't the cost of the plants get recouped the same way a renewables build is recouped through power bills?
Well, the independent science agency of this country, the CSIRO, as well as the Australian energy market operator that runs the energy grid, have both said that the cheapest way for Australia to meet its power needs in the future is through renewables. We haven't engaged some consultant to give us the advice that we were seeking. This is the independent agencies of science agencies.
What's 600 billion based on?
This country have said that.
What's 600 billion based on?
So that's come from the Smart Energy Council, who are experts in this field and have calculated the total cost at $600 billion.
It hasn't come from the CSIRO. It hasn't come from an official body. It's come from a lobby group.
Well, what I was about to say, Andrew, was that the lower figure the coalition gives assumes that the energy use in this country will decrease in the coming years. They're saying that the economy needs to contract. They're saying that aluminium smelters that provide enormous numbers of jobs in regional areas need to close or reduce their operations. So if we want to have a future with a smaller economy, with smaller energy use, then the coalition's got a plan for you. It's called nuclear. But what I think Australians want to see is be able to use more energy to create new industries and keep those jobs in heavy industry. And the cheapest way to do that is through renewable power. The problem for Peter Dutton is that everyone can see through his nuclear plan. It's why it's locked up in a policy cupboard along with every other policy commitment he's made. I mean, this is the extraordinary thing in this election campaign, Andrew, is that each signature policy of Peter Dutton, the coalition, is now locked away in a policy cupboard. I've heard of a cupboard being bare. His is overflowing with policies that he no longer wants to talk about. His nuclear plan, his work from home ban, his job cuts to public servants, and his taxpayer-funded long lunches.
You're in full flight now. I might pull you up, Murray Watt. I might pull you up. Let's talk about Medicare or Mediscare. The coalition says they'll match your funding on bulk billing, that you've essentially allowed the system to run down from where they had it, and they're just correcting things. And you're just correcting things. What do you say to that?
Well, the record shows, Andrew, that Peter Dutton was voted the worst health minister in Australia's history by the nation's doctors. And that was because he tried to put a $7 tax on GP visits. It's because he tried to rip $50 billion worth of Commonwealth
what were the bulk billing rates under him? What were the bulk billing rates under him?
The only way he was able to get bulk billing rates that served his needs and the coalition's needs was to whack in all the COVID vaccinations that we were all getting every few months. If you actually strip that back and look at like for
that was after he was health minister.
Crashed under the coalition. But he keeps pointing to those figures himself as some sort of proof of what a great job he did. The reality is, if you compare like for like, bulk billing crashed under the coalition and it's only returned under the Albanese Labor government. We want to get it higher. It's still not where we want it to be. And that's why we are opening these Medicare urgent care clinics that Peter Dutton wants to close. It's why we are providing the bulk billing incentives that he's going to have to cut in order to pay for his nuclear reactors.
Let me ask about these ads saying the coalition will shut all urgent care clinics if they're elected. That's a lie, isn't it? That's not true.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If you go back to look at what Peter Dutton had to say about our Medicare urgent care clinics, he said that he'd keep a couple of them. And the point is, Andrew, he has to find the money somewhere. He has to find the money to pay for his $600 billion in nuclear reactors. He's got no choice but to cut Medicare and to cut these urgent care clinics, to cut the incentives to GPs.
So he's not saying. Okay, hang on. He's not saying he's going to do that, but you're saying he's going to do that.
Absolutely.
That is not really true. But Murray Watt, that is not truth in advertising, is it? It's just not.
But Andrew, how else can he pay for his $600 billion in nuclear reactors? Maybe he's going to cut schools as well. Maybe he's going to cut the NDIS. He still hasn't come clean with the Australian people about how he's going to pay for these nuclear reactors. And he's got no choice, if he wants them, than to cut Medicare, to cut schools, to cut the NDIS, and to cut all those jobs out of the public sector that he's been talking about doing. This guy's got more cuts in store than Freddy Krueger. He's going to cut everything. He's got no plan for anything except cutting wages, cutting jobs, cutting services, and when Peter Dutton cuts, Australians pay.
All right, last Sunday you announced this instant tax deduction of $1,000. Is the word instant in it ironic, given people can't get it until after July 2027?
Well, I think the point that's being made is that once it comes into place, it will be instant for people. My understanding is that the advice from the ATO and Treasury was that it would take a little bit of time to put this system in place, which is why that's the starting date. But this will be a massive step forward for millions of Australian taxpayers who currently have to wade through shoeboxes of receipts. And again, Andrew, what it highlights is a big difference between the two parties. We're offering permanent tax cuts for every Australian taxpayer. Peter Dutton is going to an election wanting to increase taxes. He said he's going to repeal the tax cuts that we're providing to Australians. I can't remember a Labor leader going to an election wanting to increase income tax rates, let alone a Liberal leader, but that's what we've got from Peter Dutton. So as I say, his plan is to cut everything, jobs, wages, services. He will cut everything except your taxes, which will go up under Peter Dutton.
All right, on this issue of this request from the Russians to the Indonesian authorities for the airbase, what's your latest information on this and why won't you brief the opposition on it? I know it technically doesn't meet the Caretaker Convention requirements, but wouldn't it be an act of good faith to just give them a briefing on it?
Well, Andrew, the opposition is asking for a briefing on something that doesn't exist. I mean, they might as well ask for a briefing on the Loch Ness Monster. This is something that doesn't exist, that they fabricated. Peter Dutton ran his mouth off and started verballing and accusing the Indonesian president of making statements that he did not make.
But you don't think there was a request?
Has problems with the truth in other respects.
Are you saying there wasn't a request?
all of this is already on the record and has been answered by the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister. There is no proposal from Russia to have a base anywhere in Indonesia in the way that Peter Dutton and his colleagues have been claiming over the last couple of weeks. I mean, your next guest, Bridget McKenzie, took it one step further and made the accusation that China and Russia want to see the Labor government restored, and of course had to embarrassingly walk that back when that was also shown to be a lie. I mean, until this week, I didn't think it was possible for the Coalition's campaign to become even more shambolic than the work from home back down, which apparently is now back on the agenda. But now this week we've seen that the prospective Australian Prime Minister have to apologise for fabricating a claim made by the Indonesian President, and then your next guest having to walk back and apologise for lying about claims about China and Russia. These people are a shambles and they're not ready to govern.
I will ask her about that. I just wanted to ask you about James Paterson. You would have heard the story at the top of the show. Do you believe Ben Britton was offering him voluntary advice? Do you have any concerns Labor could lose this seat to Ben Britton?
Well, I was unaware of this until you aired those emails this morning, Andrew, but clearly James Paterson has got some explaining to do. Those emails do strongly suggest that Mr Britton was operating in a voluntary advisor capacity, which James Paterson denied on your program last week. So I think there are some things that James Paterson has to explain. And again, this comes after a week where it's not the first time that we've seen an opposition figure have to apologise for lying and making things up. Bridget McKenzie's had to do it, Peter Dutton's had to do it, and again, it just demonstrates these people are just not ready to govern.
Just finally, how do you feel with 2 weeks to go? Are you confident you can win majority government or concerned about minority?
We're not taking anything for granted, Andrew. In all the marginal seats around the country, things are still very close, and that's obviously where this election will be decided, as all elections are. So, we've always said that we're aiming for majority government. We're encouraging as many Australians as possible to put a 1 next to their Labor candidate wherever they may live. Majority government would be much more stable for the country, especially given the global uncertainty that we see at the moment. But as I say, we're not taking anything for granted, and we're going to campaign the House down until 6 p.m. on the 3rd of May.
Murray Watt, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.